Moving to a quiet neighborhood was supposed to be an upgrade. Low crime, nice houses, peaceful streets. Exactly what I needed to maintain my cover. My work wasn't the kind you talked about at dinner parties, so I kept my legend simple. An average guy working long hours in fast food. It wasn't glamorous, but it explained the weird hours, the random van picking me up and dropping me off, and why I didn't have much of a social life. For a while, things were fine. My job, at least the part people thought was my job, was believable enough. The neighborhood seemed decent. And then, I met her. Karen. She was exactly what you'd picture when you hear the name. Short, angular haircut, a permanent scowl of self-importance, and an ever-present clipboard that I swear gave her a power trip. She was the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA, and she immediately decided that I didn't belong. The first few run-ins were mild, passive-aggressive at best. She'd mistakenly knock on my door just to ask if I was aware of the HOA rules. She'd remind me that business vehicles weren't allowed to be parked overnight, even though I didn't own a business vehicle. "It's just dropping me off," I'd say, feigning confusion. She never bought it. The food truck, well, that's what everyone thought it was, would pull up at odd hours, and I'd step out, tired from a long shift. Sometimes it was midnight, sometimes later. That's what really got under Karen's skin. She wanted predictability, order, and I wasn't fitting the mold. Her first real tantrum came about a month after I moved in. I was getting out of the van after a particularly long day. The side panel was closed, but I caught her out of the corner of my eye, squinting through her blinds. 2 seconds later, she stormed across the street. "You can't keep doing this," she snapped, arms folded. I sighed. "Doing what?" "This van. Business vehicles aren't allowed overnight. It's disturbing the peace." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "It's not staying overnight. They're just dropping me off. It's unacceptable. I've gotten multiple complaints." Sure, she had. I doubted anyone else cared, but that didn't matter. I plastered on a fake smile. "I'll keep that in mind." That wasn't good enough. She hovered, peering at the van like it personally offended her. I kept my body between her and the vehicle, subtly adjusting my stance. If she got too close, I'd have to shut that down real quick. "Where do you even work?" she asked suspiciously. "Fast food," I said smoothly. Her lips curled in distaste, like she'd just smelled a dumpster on fire. "Which one?" I shrugged. "Different places. Catering gigs." That answer only made her squint harder. She huffed, but there wasn't much she could do. That night, I knew she wasn't going to let it go. And I was right. Over the next few weeks, she watched. I'd catch her peeking through her curtains or pretending to take out the trash just as the van arrived. Once, I saw her trying to look through the mail slot of my front door. I made sure to keep things locked down tight. No way was I letting her stick her nose into something that wasn't her business. But she was determined. One evening, she took it up a notch. I was heading inside when I heard her footsteps. She didn't even pretend to be subtle this time. "You know," she started, "people are wondering what's really going on with you." I turned slowly. "Oh." She smirked, triumphant. A single man, living alone, with that van coming and going at all hours? Sounds shady." I shrugged. "Sounds like a guy with a job." She stepped closer. "You wouldn't be doing anything illegal, would you?" There it was. The insinuation. She didn't have proof, but she was fishing. I smiled. "Unless flipping burgers is a crime, I think I'm good." She pursed her lips, clearly unsatisfied. "Just remember, the HOA has rules, and I enforce them." With that, she turned and stomped back to her house. I let out a slow breath. She was getting bolder, but I had no idea just how bold she was willing to get, until she finally pushed too far, and got herself arrested. Karen's obsession with my business, or rather, what she thought was my business, only got worse. She started hovering near my driveway, pretending to inspect the sidewalk cracks whenever the van dropped me off. Sometimes, I'd hear her walking around my house late at night, no doubt trying to peek through my windows. Once, I even caught her standing on tiptoe, squinting through the narrow window next to my front door. It was getting ridiculous. I did my best to keep up my cover. The agents operating the van knew the drill. We kept conversations vague, kept equipment hidden from view, and avoided anything that could raise suspicion. But Karen? She was relentless. Then came the night she nearly blew my cover. It was around 11:30 p.m. when the van rolled up. I had to grab something from my house, something important. I jogged inside, leaving the side door slightly ajar. The agents stayed inside, their setup glowing with the faint hum of surveillance equipment. They were running an op, nothing major, but they had eyes on a target a few blocks away. Karen, of course, saw everything. And this time, she snapped. From my kitchen window, I saw her storming across the street, her bathrobe flapping wildly, clipboard clutched in one hand and her phone in the other. I sighed. Here we go? The agents inside the van must have noticed her approaching too, because one of them muttered through my earpiece. We got movement. Looks like your neighborhood cryptid is inbound. Yeah, I muttered back. Stand by. Then, I heard her screech. I have had enough of this. I barely made it to the door before I saw her yanking the van's side door wide open. What happened next was one of the most satisfying things I'd ever seen. She went silent. The glow of surveillance monitors illuminated her face as she took in exactly what was happening inside the van. Two agents, headsets on, surrounded by high-tech surveillance equipment, turned slowly to look at her. One of them cocked an eyebrow. Well, that's unfortunate. Karen's jaw dropped. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. What is this? What are you people doing? The agent closest to the door just gave a slow, deliberate nod. You already got on our nerves. Pack it up. Before Karen could react, he reached out, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her inside. Her scream was cut off as the door slid shut behind her. I was halfway down my driveway when I saw the van shake slightly from the movement inside. Another agent cracked the door open just enough to poke his head out and call over to me. Hey, we got a situation. Oh, you got a situation? I shot back, exasperated. I have to live next to her. Inside, Karen was sputtering. You can't just grab me like that. I'll call the HOA. I'll call the police. The agent leaned against the doorframe. Lady, we are the police. Karen went rigid. I stepped closer and peered inside. She was sandwiched between two very irritated federal agents, both giving her the kind of look reserved for someone who had just seriously messed up. You're under arrest, the lead agent told her flatly, for obstructing the operations of a federal investigation. Karen looked at me, her expression desperate. Tell them this is a mistake. I raised my hands. Hey, I'm just a fast food guy. She sputtered. You are not a fast food guy. The agent patted her down, confiscating her phone as she squirmed. We're gonna need to bring her in. Then, as if this night couldn't get any better, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A tow truck. Karen's tow truck. She had actually called for my van to be towed. I laughed, shaking my head. You've got to be kidding me. The tow truck pulled up, and the driver, a grizzled man who clearly didn't care about anyone's drama, rolled down his window. All right, where's the vehicle? One of the agents hopped out of the van, stretching his arms. Oh, perfect timing. Yeah, buddy, you're taking a car tonight. The tow truck driver squinted at the van. That one. The agent turned and pointed, not at the van, but at Karen's car. That one. Karen's second jaw drop of the night was somehow even better than the first. What? She screeched. That's my car. You can't. The agent clapped a hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, you're illegally parked. But you called for a tow truck, I reminded her. Might as well get your money's worth. Karen was still sputtering when the tow truck driver, who was clearly just here to do his job and go home, shrugged and got to work. Chains clanked as he hooked up her car. Meanwhile, the agents inside the van were already making calls. Yeah, we got an incident. Civilian interfered with the op. Yeah, full obstruction. Another agent glanced at me. You gonna be okay after this? I smirked. Oh, this is the best thing that's happened all month. And then, as Karen's car was slowly lifted onto the tow truck, the police sirens started wailing in the distance. The night wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. Even as she was sandwiched between two federal agents inside the surveillance van, even as her car was getting hooked up to the tow truck, she still fought. This is an outrage, she shrieked, her voice a mix of desperation and rage. You can't arrest me. I'm on the HOA board. I have rights. One of the agents, the one who had dragged her inside, sighed deeply. Lady, stop talking. Outside, I watched as the tow truck driver gave zero consideration for Karen's outrage and casually finished securing her car. He barely even glanced at her as he walked up to the agent standing beside me. Where's this going? The agent pulled out a notepad, scribbled an address, and handed it over. Impound lot. Karen practically vibrated with fury. Impound. My car. I leaned against the van, arms crossed. I mean, you did call the tow truck. She turned on me with the kind of glare that could incinerate a man. You set me up. I laughed. Oh, I set you up? Karen, you ran over here, threw open the van doors, and interrupted an active federal investigation. Nobody forced you. Karen's lips flapped like she was trying to form words, but couldn't quite manage. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the night, and she froze. Cops. A pair of squad cars rolled up, sirens shutting off as uniformed officers stepped out. A tall, burly cop with graying hair approached first, eyes scanning the scene. The way his gaze lingered on Karen told me he already knew her. Great. That meant she was a regular problem. One of the agents stepped forward and flashed a badge. We're with the Bureau. This woman obstructed a federal operation. We're pressing charges. The cop let out a low whistle, rubbing the back of his neck. Karen, he sighed, as if this was not his first time dealing with her nonsense. What the hell did you do? Karen's entire demeanor changed. Suddenly, she wasn't the screeching banshee anymore. She was delicate. Innocent. A victim. Oh, Officer Stevens, thank goodness you're here. She tried to take a step forward, but the agents flanking her tightened their grip. These men assaulted me. They grabbed me against my will. There. Officer Stevens held up a hand. Karen, stop. She did. The man looked at the agents. Tell me exactly what happened. One of them gestured toward the van. We were conducting surveillance on a high-priority target. This woman, he jabbed a thumb at Karen, stormed over, started yelling, and threw open the doors while we were in the middle of an operation. Karen's face twisted. I was investigating suspicious activity. I scoffed. You were snooping. She then refused to leave, the agent continued. And when we restrained her, she threatened to call the HOA on us. Officer Stevens blinked. The HOA. Even his partner, a younger officer with a buzz cut, snorted. Karen, realizing she was losing ground, straightened her spine. Yes, because this man, she pointed at me, her finger trembling with rage, has been violating HOA rules for months. He is engaged in suspicious activity, people coming and going at all hours. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Officer Stevens pinched the bridge of his nose. Karen, that's not your job. But the HOA. Karen. He cut her off sharply. The HOA is not the law. Her jaw dropped. But, Karen, for the first time since this whole disaster started, she actually shut up. Officer Stevens sighed, turning back to the agents. You pressing charges? The lead agent nodded. Absolutely. Then she's coming with us. That's when the panic really set in. Karen screamed. No, you can't do this. I did nothing wrong. I was just. Officer Stevens gave a tired nod, and his partner took over, expertly cuffing her as she thrashed. Let go of me. This is my neighborhood. I make the rules. I waved as they hauled her toward the police car. Hey Karen, don't forget to file a complaint with the HOA. Her shriek was legendary. I swear, even the tow truck driver chuckled. The moment they shoved her into the back of the squad car and slammed the door shut, silence fell over the street. The agent next to me exhaled. Jesus Christ. I nodded. Yup. One of the other agents looked at me, then at the house Karen had come from. You said she's with the HOA? Oh yeah, I said. And she abuses the hell out of that power. The agent exchanged glances with his partner. You know what, he mused. We should probably look into that. And that's when things got really interesting. Because as it turned out, Karen's little HOA empire was built on some very shady business. And we were about to bring it all crashing down. The moment Karen was shoved into the back of the squad car, I thought I'd finally get some peace. Maybe she'd spend a night in jail, stew in her own arrogance, and come back slightly less insufferable. But Karen's nightmare was just beginning. The next morning, I got a call. "You up?" It was Agent Carter, the guy who had dragged Karen into the van the night before. "Barely." I ran a hand down my face. "What's up? You said she's on the HOA board, right?" "Yeah, pretty sure she is the HOA board." "Well, turns out," he said, sounding amused, "your local HOA is a hotbed of fraud." I sat up straighter. "What?" "We ran a check on your pal Karen. Seems like she's been using the HOA as her personal cash cow. Fake fines, inflated dues, sketchy maintenance fees, all of it funneling straight into her pockets." I let out a low whistle. "No way." "Oh way." He chuckled. "And get this, half the fines she's handed out weren't even legal. She's been using HOA rules to bully homeowners into paying up, and most of them just went along with it because they were afraid of retaliation." Damn. I shook my head, both impressed and disgusted. "So what's the plan?" "Well, for starters, we're handing everything over to the local DA. HOA fraud cases take time, but with what we've found, she's looking at major legal trouble." He paused. "And that's before we even get into her obstruction charges from last night." I laughed. "She's screwed. Very screwed." He sounded satisfied. "Thought you'd like to know." I grinned. "Oh, I love to know." After the call ended, I sat back and let it sink in. Karen wasn't just a nosy busybody. She was a full-on scam artist, running a racket under the guise of protecting the neighborhood. And now, she was about to lose everything. News spread fast. By the end of the day, everyone in the neighborhood knew Karen had been arrested. But what really set things off was when a team of investigators showed up at her house with warrants. That was when people started asking questions. And then the real stories came out. Mrs. Thompson, the sweet old lady down the block, had been fined $500 last year for unauthorized lawn decorations. What was the decoration, you ask? A tiny ceramic gnome next to her flower bed. The Johnsons? They got slapped with a $1,200 fine for parking their car incorrectly in their own driveway. The worst? The Ramirez family, new homeowners who had just moved in last year, had nearly lost their house because Karen had been secretly inflating their HOA dues and threatening foreclosure when they struggled to pay. One by one, the stories poured out. And by the time the news hit the local paper, Karen's name was poison. I was outside getting my mail when Mr. Patel, my next-door neighbor, approached me. He was usually pretty quiet, but today he looked downright gleeful. "Did you hear?" He grinned, holding up the newspaper. "They're launching a full investigation into the HOA board." I took the paper and skimmed the headline. HOA president arrested. Fraud allegations under investigation. I whistled. Damn, that was fast. "Oh, it gets better." Mr. Patel smirked. "With Karen gone, they're dissolving the HOA." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He nodded. "Most of the homeowners signed a petition this morning. Without Karen and her little minions running things, there's no one left to keep it going. We're voting to shut it down." I let out a short, surprised laugh. "So you're telling me, no more HOA?" "No more HOA." I grinned. Best news ever. A few days later, Karen was released on bail, but she might as well have stayed in jail. Her empire? Gone. Her car? Still in the impound lot. Her house? Oh yeah, she was being forced to sell it. See, when the investigation into her finances started, they discovered she had been skimming way more money than just a few fake fines. We're talking tens of thousands in misallocated funds. And since she had used her own house as collateral for some shady dealings, well, let's just say the bank wasn't too sympathetic. The day the for sale sign went up in her yard was glorious. I was outside watering my plants, something I never did before, but today felt like a good day to appreciate the neighborhood when I saw her. She stood on her porch, staring at the sign like she couldn't believe it was real. I sipped my coffee and smiled. She felt my stare. Her head snapped toward me, and for the first time ever, she didn't look angry. She looked defeated. I raised my coffee mug in salute. "Rough week, Karen?" Her jaw clenched. She turned and stormed inside without a word. I chuckled to myself. Justice. It's a beautiful thing. But we weren't quite done yet. Because the last part of Karen's downfall, that was still to come. Karen's reign of terror was over. The HOA? Gone. Her car? Impounded. Her house? on the market. But the real cherry on top? Karen was still under investigation, and things were about to get a lot worse for her. A week after Karen's meltdown, Agent Carter called me again. "You're gonna love this," he said, sounding amused. I leaned back in my chair. "Hit me." "So, remember how we started digging into the HOA's finances?" "Yeah." "Well, turns out, Karen wasn't just scamming people in your neighborhood. She had her fingers in 3 other HOAs in nearby communities." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Wait, what?" "She's been running the same scam in multiple places. Fake fines, bogus foreclosure threats, skimming off the top. She expanded her operation. And get this, she had an offshore account." I laughed. Full-on belly laughed. Karen. Suburban Karen. Trying to play with the big boys. "Holy shit," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "She actually thought she was a criminal mastermind." "Yeah, well," Carter chuckled. "She was about as subtle as a screaming toddler in a library." "So what's next?" "Federal fraud charges," he said casually. "Wire fraud, bank fraud, tax evasion, you name it. DA's office is already prepping the case." I let out a slow whistle. "Damn. So, how much time is she looking at?" "Oh, years," Carter said, clearly enjoying this. "She's probably gonna cop a plea deal, but even then, we're talking serious jail time." I grinned. "She's gonna love that." "Oh yeah. Hope she likes orange." A month later, Karen's house was officially up for auction. It was poetic. The woman who had spent years policing other people's properties, writing up fines for unapproved paint colors, trash cans left out too long, and unauthorized Christmas decorations, was now losing her own home. And the best part? Half the neighborhood showed up just to watch. I stood near the back, sipping a coffee as the auctioneer rattled off bids. The house went for a decent price. Karen had kept it in good shape, probably because she wanted to impress people, but nobody actually cared about the sale. We were all here for the moment. The moment when Karen, standing off to the side with her lawyer, realized she had nothing left. And then it happened. She turned, saw the crowd, saw me. Karen's eyes locked onto mine. For the first time ever, there was no fire in them. No self-righteous fury, no smug superiority. Just pure, unfiltered humiliation. She knew. She knew that everyone in this crowd had gathered not for the house, not for the auction, but for her downfall. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something to her. Probably something about maintaining composure, about not making a scene. But Karen? Karen had never been one to back down quietly. She clenched her fists. Her face turned an impressive shade of red. And for a brief, beautiful moment, I thought she might actually explode in front of all of us. But then, she did something even better. She turned, stormed away, and got into the one thing she had left, a beat-up, decades-old sedan she'd probably borrowed from a relative. No luxury SUV. No clipboard in hand. No power. Just Karen, the fallen dictator, running from the kingdom she'd lost. As the engine sputtered to life, I couldn't help myself. I raised my coffee in salute and shouted, "Drive safe, Karen. Don't forget to check the HOA regulations on used cars." The crowd erupted into laughter. Karen peeled out of the parking lot so fast she nearly took out a mailbox. And just like that, she was gone. With Karen out of the picture, the neighborhood thrived. The HOA? Dead and buried. No more ridiculous fines. No more stupid rules about the height of grass or the number of lawn ornaments allowed. People actually talk to each other now, without fear of being reported for a violation. Barbecues started happening again. Porch lights stayed on a little longer. Hell, someone even started a community Facebook group, and for the first time, it wasn't a battleground of passive-aggressive complaints. And me? I stayed. The house was great. The neighbors were finally normal, and best of all, I got to live in the one place where I had personally helped take down an HOA tyrant. One evening, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying a well-earned beer, when my new neighbor, a chill retired guy named Frank, walked over. "Heard the last owner of that house was a real piece of work," he said, nodding toward Karen's old property. I smirked. "Oh, you have no idea." He chuckled. "Well, can't imagine it was worse than the HOA I dealt with back in '09. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you got HOA horror stories." Frank took a sip of his beer. Buddy, I led the charge to take mine down. I grinned. This was the start of a beautiful friendship. Because if there's one thing I had learned from all of this, HOAs don't stand a chance when the right people fight back. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments whether you liked everything, and see you next time.